Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock is one of the rare members of Congress who's also a member of the clergy, an active member of the clergy. He serves as the senior pastor at the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. That's the same church where Martin Luther King Jr. was co-pastor along with his father, MLK Sr. And almost exactly a year ago, Warnock had the privilege of a private audience with Pope Francis at the Vatican. Upon the news of the Pope's passing yesterday, Senator Warnock posted about that meeting, recalling his admiration of Pope Francis's work to center the poor and marginalized. Joining me now is Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, a Democrat. He has a new book out today. It's a children's book titled We're in This Together, Leo's Lunchbox, about the need to share what we have, a message I think the Pope would have approved of. It's great to have you here. I saw that message about the Pope and want to just ask about your experience of getting to meet him.
No, thank you so much. Great to be here with you. I have long admired Pope Francis as someone whose ministry centered the people that Jesus talked about. In his very first sermon, Jesus said, I came to preach good news to the poor. And Pope Francis embodied that. He's the first Pope from the global South. And I think he brought the sensibilities and the concerns of the poor to that office. He centered human dignity. And I think he pushed even that institution to live into the full truth of that gospel. And it was a real honor to spend time with him at the Vatican about a year ago.
It's been striking to me, the Pope, I think, is a kind of beacon for people around the world, even if they're not Catholic, this Pope in particular, who are two things, who consider themselves religious in whatever religious tradition they have, and consider themselves, let's say, broadly progressive, right? Or concerned about those who don't have. And it's been striking to me how beloved he has become because of a sense that he sort of fused piety with that concern for progressive values.
A man of deep faith and abiding love and authentic humility.
Did you feel that when you met him?
I did.
Yeah.
I have to tell you that. I admired him from a distance, and meeting him up close, you could just feel the authenticity. He said to me, and I wanted to meet with him because, you know, here I am, a pastor, found myself in the Senate. I said, I think this man knows something about faith and politics.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so we had a good conversation, and I just found him to be genuine, and he had a great sense of humor. As we were getting ready to end our meeting together, he said, let's pray. And I said, great. Wow, the Pope is going to pray. He said, I want you to pray first. And he jokingly said, oh, by the way, pray for me and not against me. And I had a big laugh about that. And then I prayed for him and his ministry. And he prayed for me.
Wow.
And together we prayed for the world.
That's a very profound experience.
It's something I will never forget.
You, I think, have said from the beginning, from your first campaign, how your faith vision animates your worldview, your politics. Your children's book is about kind of just the sort of basic children's lesson to share. Right now, there is going to be a big fight in Washington about these kind of budget priorities and about how we, you know, as a society, basically share. Where do you see this headed?
Well, look, my work in the Senate is an extension of my ministry, not in the sense of creed and orthodoxy or whatever one's faith tradition, but the values of that faith, compassion, caring for others, kindness. You know, Micah says, do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God. I'm a Matthew 25 Christian. Where Jesus said, I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was sick. I was in prison and you visited me. And someone said, Lord, when were you hungry? When were you thirsty? When were you in prison? He said, inasmuch as you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it also unto me. And so that is the ethic that I take to my work as a legislator, which is why I was deeply concerned about what's going on with this budget. They want to cut $800 billion out of Medicaid. I mean, this is literally health care. There are people we're not going to cover because of this. Cuts in SNAP, which feeds hungry families. The poorest people in our country are children. And they're talking about cutting Head Start. Well, Chris, you're looking tonight not only at a United States Senator, but a Head Start baby.
Oh, that's right.
I know the impact of good federal public policy. And what I say to my friends on both sides of the aisle, with whom I agree and disagree, is that the legislation we write at the end of the day is a letter to our children. And we ought to ask ourselves what we want that letter to say.
One of your colleagues in the congressional caucus of Georgia, Austin Scott, basically discussing this notion. They're very clearly aware they need to cut all this money from Medicaid. They know it's not popular. And so you're sort of watching them work through like a child with a Rubik's Cube. Like, how can we get this? So the newest thing is we're going to cut the federal contribution. And then if the states don't pick it up, well, then that's on the states. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Nobody would be kicked off of Medicaid as long as the governors decided that they wanted to continue to fund the program. And so we are going to ask the states to pick up and pay some additional percentage of the Medicaid percentage. So
the idea is Republicans in Congress aren't cutting Medicaid. It's going to be the governors. What do you think?
So can I tell you that the night they passed this awful budget, and I often say that a budget is not just a fiscal document, it's a moral document. Show me a budget and I'll show you who you think matters. I actually offered an amendment that said, won't we agree as a Congress that we will not cut people's Medicaid coverage? They voted that amendment down.
In the U.S. Senate.
In the Senate, because they know that they are trying to cut Medicaid, cut Social Security, cut Head Start. Why? For the noble cause of giving multimillionaires and billionaires a tax cut, because God knows they are really struggling.
Today was there was a kind of concerted effort from the Trump administration to roll out their agenda on what they say is anti-Christian bias throughout the federal government. The Guardian reports the Veterans Affairs Administration sent an email to employees ordering them to report instances of anti-Christian bias, seeking instances of informal policies, procedures, understanding hostile to Christian views, any adverse responses to requests for religious exemptions on the previous vaccine mandates, retaliatory actions taken or threatened in response to abstaining from certain procedures or treatment. Do you feel, as an actual sitting pastor, do you encounter a lot of anti-Christian bias? Do you think this is a problem gripping the federal government?
Most of the anti-Christian bias that I'm encountering is being visited upon us by people who do that in the name of Christianity. I think if they want to defend the faith, they ought to defend the poor. That's who Jesus stood up for. I understand that this same letter was sent out by the State Department. Well, if the State Department wants to defend the faith and the meaning of the faith, they should restore those cuts to USAID, because here we're talking about resources that strengthen the poor all over the globe, which, by the way, is not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. It's good American diplomacy. They would not cut PEPFAR if they want to do something. I think these draconian cuts to poor people, both here and abroad, are both anti-Christian and inhumane.
Is there a tension between being someone who has to stand before an electorate and get a majority of the voters to vote for you, and witnessing prophetic Christian faith when what Jesus said was, visit the prisoner and visit the poor? It seems to me there kind of is, right? Because PEPFAR and going to visit the prisoners aren't. I mean, the lesson of Easter weekend is that that's not necessarily popular with the crowd.
Right. And, maybe that's why Jesus ended up, on a cross. He did drop by the temple and he began to turn over the tables.
Right.
And I think we are in a moment where Jesus is a victim of identity theft. I don't know what Bible folks are reading, attacking the poor in the name of the faith, which is why from my pulpit, and in the legislation that I write, and in my newest children's book, Leo's Lunchbox, I'm talking about a faith where we reach out and we create what I call a culture of compassion and kindness, hopefully pass that on to our children. The book is literally based on the miracle of the loaves and the fish, where Jesus feeds the 5,000. And often, I think we think the miracle is in the multiplication, that somehow there's more than enough. But one of the Gospels says that a little boy brought his lunch. And so that's what inspires this modern story. And I think if that little boy brought his lunch and offered to be generous, perhaps that generosity took place throughout the crowd. Maybe the miracle is that we discover that we can create a contagion of generosity and kindness. And when we do that, we discover we have more than enough if we see that we are all tied together, as Dr. King said, in a single garment of destiny.
Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, you can get his new book, We're in This Together, Leo's Lunchbox, wherever you get your books. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.